So one thing that has been really exciting is the Argentine sort of National Securities Commission, or CNV, as it's summarized in English, just passed the first regulatory framework for the tokenization of real-world assets.
What I really like when these things happen is to understand what do they validate. The most important part of this news is local stablecoins could boost dollar demand. I mean, I love stablecoins, they're great. We're here to expand the adoption of crypto, but I think that we are entering the phase of crypto where we have like macroeconomic and global policy impact, specifically with stablecoins. Why should crypto be taxed different than bonds and stocks when they are treated as a financial instrument? Hello everybody, welcome to another episode of Frontera, the podcast where we analyze what's happening in crypto in Latin America. I'm Mav, co-founder and CEO of Bando and Espacio Crypto, and I'm with my good friend Kush, founder of, I always say co-founder.
You always say co-founder.
I don't know why, and you're like a solo founder, so how's everything, dude?
Good, man, good. I'm currently here in Crecimiento in Argentina, so can't complain, man. How are you doing?
Dude, really excited. I think that there's a lot of things happening in our region, also globally. Actually, this week in Bando, we enabled for people to spend in Brazil. So now people can go to bando.cool or use us in Farcaster, Mini App, and MiniPay, and more wallets now, and they can pay directly at really cool merchants. So I don't know, a lot of things happening. And also, one of the things that I'm more excited about is Frontera. We are constantly writing the best essays. Literally, I think that our essays are just amazing. And this week was really fun because for the first time, one top tier VC approached us to get our knowledge of the region. So this Frontera thesis is playing out, man.
Love a good forward-looking thesis and positioning yourself very early in taking these bets, right? We started this thing because we said, hey, we think Latin America is the most important region for crypto and nobody's talking about it and communicating it for the rest of the world. And since we started this, I feel that it's been like a continuous journey of just loads of, generally generating new knowledge and insights, but also I think the opportunities that have fortunately come our way as a consequence is really exciting. So yeah, dude, we're cooking.
Definitely cooking. And I would love to start our conversation. Tell me a little bit of your week, because you are currently in Buenos Aires, and the Uniswap house in Buenos Aires looked crazy. It just looked so cool. You had asados, you had football, you had wine. How was it? Because I think that this is one of the most important events, the largest DeFi protocol looking at our region. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so as a part of Uniswap's tour across Latin America, they hosted a series of activations, which included a KOL/ecosystem dinner where we invited a bunch of thought leaders across Argentina. There was an institutional dinner as well with the Ripio team that was hosted. There was a big community dinner as well, an asado, which was great. And just a whole bunch of really amazing activations basically that went down over the course of these few days. It was a beautiful house in Recoleta, which is an amazing neighborhood in Buenos Aires. I mean, you can see this house was honestly on another level. So shout out to the Uniswap team for really, I think, going really hard in the region and being very intentional with how they engage here. So yeah, man, I've honestly loved it. It's next level, right?
This is the Uniswap mansion.
Yeah,
a house is an understatement.
Yeah. It was a really special place that we did the activation in. So
I would love to read this tweet from Masha. Who's Masha? Remind us. Oh, she's doing partnerships at Uniswap.
Exactly. Yeah.
And she posted these like really beautiful pictures about the Uniswap mansion, and she says, reasons to be bullish on the future of DeFi in Argentina. The importance of self-custody doesn't need to be explained here. Crypto already empowers millions of people across the country. Regulation is evolving and there's real optimism around what it could unlock. So yeah, and I really like this part of the tweet that she says, we're here to learn and accelerate the work that has already started long before our arrival. So I think that this is another indication. We always say this, the relevance of this region. I think that is one of the largest regions in the world that it's been underserved. I've been thinking a lot about, we discussed this with Ben in our last episode that you should, if you haven't listened to that, we had Ben read the stablecoin lead for Bitso in our last Frontier episode. Great pod, you should go and listen to it. And we were talking about this LatAm trilemma between problems, talent, and capital. So in Latin America, there's a lot of problems that crypto can solve. So that's a big opportunity. There's not a lot of capital, so we have a lot of scrappy teams trying to bootstrap their way into a real product. And I think that we have a talent gap. And I give a lot of my arguments on why I see that. So having Uniswap here is just another validation of how many opportunities they are in the region. So really excited. What's coming for Uniswap in Latin America?
So one thing that has been really exciting is the Argentine sort of National Securities Commission, or CNV, as it's summarized in English, just passed the first regulatory framework for the tokenization of real-world assets that started as a public consultation back in April, and now is a really exciting, although very early, sort of first step towards modernizing capital markets here in Argentina, right? So essentially what it allows is it focuses very much so on financial trusts and closed-end mutual funds that can be offered into the public, right? But not necessarily as publicly traded securities. It's sort of a weird, and that's why it's very early in sort of its innings, but it points towards essentially being able to tokenize these financial trusts and closed-end mutual funds, right? And it officially recognizes, legally speaking, the digital representation of these securities on blockchain, right? So I think that's the thing that for me is really exciting. Is it also seems there's kind of a regulatory opportunity that's opening up here in the country, and what this essentially means is you can hold a representation of a mutual fund or a trust on chain, and then you can legally convert that into some sort of like traditional financial asset, right? So this is something that's happening within this regulatory framework that's being developed currently here in Argentina. But again, what I love is that we're essentially seeing these traditional markets, in this case like mutual funds, saying, hey, we want to get closer to what crypto can essentially offer us, right? So man, it just, like, we were just talking about the importance of like having a good thesis and betting on it, and it's totally playing out here. What do you think this like unlocks, and what's the significance of this for the rest of the region?
I think that something that excites me about this is the Bondi team. Those guys are great, and actually that impacts a lot on their play. It's another validation. I think that what I really like when these things happen is to understand what do they validate. I think that that's a great way of analyzing news, because if I love scientific thinking, right? And scientific thinking is not trusting science as a religion. It's basically learning based on hypotheses and validating things that you assumed were true and discarding things that are not true now, right? So on the Bondi team is doing this. They're tokenizing debt, like private debt, and I think that that's a real world asset. And they've been building this in Argentina for some time now, and seeing that they were right in the initial hypothesis that was going to be possible eventually. It happened sooner rather than later, so really exciting for them. And what unlocks is that I think that there is not a cohesive working group in Latin America to understand how to regulate. Basically, everyone or most of the countries follow the US, and Argentina passing this law is super relevant because it marks the state that all other countries can follow. And something that is also interesting about Argentina is that I think that Argentina has the more hungry founders. And you are currently there with Crecimiento and the Uniswap house. What do you think about this?
Yeah, man. I mean, so I think El Salvador was the first one to just go all out, right? Like they went from zero crypto friendliness to then making Bitcoin legal tender, right? But Bukele was able to do that because he had sort of the political will. So, whereas I think here there's a much more complex bureaucracy and political landscape, and so the fact that this is just like, oh, you can now tokenize a mutual fund, right? And it can be represented on chain. I think that's like one step. I'd say like the next step is then how do we do two things? How do we expand the regulation so that it covers more broader reaching areas? Because how many people are like trying to access mutual funds, right? It's like a fair amount of people, but it's not everybody, right? So I think we need to expand these regulatory frameworks, and then we also need to spread them across the rest of the region, right? And as you say, there's no real space, I would say this is probably one of the only few spaces that's trying to think about, regionally speaking, what are the implications here and how do we enhance capital markets in the region, right? So,
Yeah.
but yeah, and then going back to the point on builders, I mean, yeah, this is like where companies like Bello, Lemon, Ripio, et cetera, will really excel because they have that distribution power, and I think they'll be able to essentially say, okay, look, we previously offered you crypto, now we can offer you using the same rails, sort of these mutual funds, for example, right?
And also, I think that the ecosystem is really important. Different founders supporting each other. It's relevant for a region and a country to grow. And man, I'd like to continue through the docket. The first thing that I want to discuss from the information that we gathered this week is you share with us this news. That is that the headline is the Bank of Korea warns local stablecoins could boost dollar demand against presidential goals. Well, the most important part of this news is local stablecoins could boost dollar demand. And actually, in this week's essay, that's what we analyze, the stablecoin sandwich. And I know that we have maybe different takes here, so I'd love to discuss this for a couple of minutes. The stablecoin sandwich thesis is that in order to have a more efficient capital market, the conversion between stablecoins should happen on chain. And that's basically the on chain FX thesis. If you have USDC or USDT and you do the swap for Mexican peso through an order book in a centralized exchange, that's a lot more inefficient. There's less price discovery and also there's less liquidity in the long term. So the stablecoin sandwich thesis tells that in order for on-chain FX to happen, we need to have local stablecoins and US dollar stablecoins. And in my perspective, I think that this is an obvious play for that will increase demand for US dollars everywhere that there is a local stablecoin. So it's an intrinsic risk for the price of the fiat currencies, and also it's a great way for the US to export the dollar and to keep dollar dominance. So I feel weird in a sense that, I mean, I love stablecoins, they're great. We're here to expand the adoption of crypto, but I think that we are entering the phase of crypto where we have like macroeconomic and global policy impact, specifically with stablecoins. And I think that it's important to analyze that because if we just embrace this type of solutions, there could be if this thesis plays out, I think that in the next 5 to 10 years, there are going to be countries who opt out of their local currency and opt into the US dollar, basically through stablecoins. And also with all this crazy politics around with thinking that they can also invite foreign countries to be part of the US, like basically new colonies. This could be a really strong path towards a new like internet era colonization. So we just need to be worried about that. So what do you think? Because I think that you have a different perspective.
Well, the headline reads sort of funny when you read this, right? Is the president of Korea is concerned that local stablecoins will drive dollar dominance. Because in reality, the way that I think about this is that what people ultimately want is better financial primitives and better access to faster movement of money, better access to credit. And the reality is that DeFi rails enable and unlock that. I think my perspective is that we can't say definitively that local stablecoins will either accelerate dollar dominance or not. I actually think there's like global macro trends that are out exogenous to crypto that determine whether people want dollars or their local currencies, right? For the time being. I think that the markets, but the thing is we will trend towards whichever capital markets and whichever currencies have better, again, access to credit and faster, better, cheaper ways of moving money around the world. So for the time being, that is dollars. I think the concern here of the president is that what will happen is that people will buy the digital Korean won as represented by local stablecoin and then very easily swap that to some US-based stablecoin. If I was in his position, I would say local stablecoins are inevitable. What we should be doing is ensuring that we're accelerating the exploration of local stablecoins and bringing our entire financial system such that people are not incentivized to, if he wants to protect the Korean won, not incentivized to jump over to a US dollar stablecoin. Why am I, and I give this out of like a personal example, right? So for example, BRZ, which is a Brazilian real stablecoin, it's yielding currently on Aerodrome, or was, a couple months ago, like 80% APY in the BRZ USDC pool, right? I, for the first time ever, am a holder of reales because I had this opportunity to, it's crazy. Like I was, oh shit, like, I hold reales. But it was only because I was incentivized financially to hold them, right? Same with CETES. In theory, we could drive massive demand for Mexican bonds because now they're issued on these markets, right? So I just feel like it might be, I don't know if we can definitively today. I think we'd have to create a very nuanced, like much more complex thesis that says local stablecoins will impact US dollar adoption in this way or that way, right?
Yeah. I think that the important point here is bringing that possibility, because I don't think that anyone's talking about this. I haven't heard this anywhere. Have you? I mean, like all the media companies of the US are like, go stablecoins. They are the best thing, obviously, because they're American. But in our perspective, I think that we have the responsibility. If we are seeing this risk, it's something that we must bring for the discussion. And I don't know how it's going to play out. If you think of the example that you said about 80% APY on the Aerodrome pool of USDC Brazilian real, that's basically a way of incentivizing liquidity, right? And in order to have on-chain effects, you need to have a lot of a deep liquid market. And I think that AMMs are the best price discovery mechanisms in the world today, because of the way that they are so frictionless. So it's going to be really interesting to see how the local stablecoin thesis plays out. I think that is one of the things that we are analyzing in the deeper way. Like the last 5 or 6 essays on Frontera have been about that. If we can like post a little book on the stablecoin, like on local stablecoins, because we've been producing, I can't stop saying this, but we really are making the best crypto content about Latin America. And I think that one of the final elements for local stablecoins to play are having strong USD stablecoins, and that's what happened this week with the pass of the stablecoin bill, like the Genius Act. And a couple of things that I want to analyze here is basically this opens the door for any financial institution and credit union, for any bank and credit union to launch a stablecoin. So what we're gonna see, JP Morgan stablecoin that it launched, or the first experiments are happening right now. Also, I think obviously every bank will have a stablecoin, and one important part is that it prohibits big tech companies to launch a stablecoin. So Meta, Google, Amazon, they cannot launch a stablecoin. So what they're gonna do, they're either gonna buy a small fintech company that can do that, or partner with someone that can do that. So yeah, it's really exciting to see this. And the next step is we have the stablecoins. Now it's a liquidity problem. I'm excited to see how this plays out in Latin America. I don't know, do you want to comment anything here, or should we move on?
I mean, I think this is two things to comment here is that we will, as we've talked about previously on this podcast, what happens in Latin American regulation is we look to what the US is doing, we look to Europe is doing, and we essentially just about copy paste it, right? So I would expect, here's another prediction, by the end of this year, we'll see, in at least one Latin American country, we will see similar legislation to the Genius Act being passed by the end of this year. Like this is just always what happens.
Dude, that's super bullish. Maybe give people 12 months.
All right.
Our legislators are super slow.
That's true. They'll come to Frontera to learn about what they should be legislating towards. I know we have some legislators listening to this too. But yeah, that's essentially like how I'm thinking and seeing this, to be honest, right now.
Yeah, there's a lot of, I know that in Mexico, we copy a lot of the US legislation, right? So that's a natural thing. Yeah,
I was just going to, the other point I was going to mention was around like the infrastructure to bring all, like, this is where people, like, we published a piece that's like, on-chain FX is a red ocean. But when we think about all of the world's money coming on chain, I mean, we're talking about trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars, right? And so think about the blue ocean opportunity that represents as well, right? And like the infrastructure that's required for all of the world's money to come on chain, basically, right? So I think like that's the other thing that I'm really excited by is the infrastructure plays and that transition from like off-chain to on-chain capital markets and everything that will unlock. Like it makes me actually just insanely bullish.
And talking about on-chain effects, I think that this is the news that I'm more excited about this week. And it's the launch of NextFX. NextFX raised $9.1 million in a seed round led by Hunt Ventures and also in the participation with Castle Island Ventures, Oak, HCFT, Maya Capital, Coinbase Ventures, and Paxos. So basically, what they're doing is on-chain effects. That's their thesis. And why am I so excited about this? Because it's launched by 3 people that I worked with at Bitso. It's led by, the founders are Alberto Sanchez, Santiago Alvarado, and Jason, I don't remember his last name. And the story about these guys. So Alberto Beto is, you met him, right? Did you meet him at the Uniswap house in Mexico?
Yeah, we had dinner with him, exactly.
Dude, he's great. He's one of the best people in the industry. Just a little bit about him. He worked at BlackRock, UBS, JP Morgan, at Bitso. So this guy knows a little bit about FX. He was one of the people that launched BlackRock in Mexico. He was leading liquidity in Bitso during the last years. Santiago Alvarado was the lead of Bitso Business for 3 years, for a couple of years. That was his main goal. He started the whole Bitso business unit in Bitso. And Jason Lush was a senior vice president of engineering at Bitso. So the 3 guys worked at Bitso. I'm a super bullish on this team. We need to bring them. And also raising a seed round of $9.1 million in Latin America. I think this might be the largest seed round in LatAm ever. At least in crypto, I'm sure it's the largest seed round in Latin America. But it actually could be the largest seed round for any company in LatAm.
Yeah, but a $9 million seed is pretty ginormous. Would love to bring these people onto the pod and talk more about XFX. So yeah, man, I don't know. Sometimes when you work in this industry that's just like transition and creating the future, you sort of feel like, oh my gosh, everything is just happening simultaneously all at once. And you're just like, oh my God, how do I keep up with this, right? I mean, it's just, and I think in particular, we were talking before we started recording about the Circle like price action and how it's just 6x basically since its announcement and launch. And I think that's driving a lot of this like mania around the interest in stablecoins essentially.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that so much happening. And talking about seed rounds, I only found one largest seed round that was Canastra, fintech startup in Brazil. They raised 13 million, and then NextFX 9.1 million. So their value proposition is powering international settlement, and we are definitely bringing these guys to talk about the on-chain FX thesis. And moving along with more news in Latin America in crypto this week. So Brazil ends the crypto tax exemptions, and now it's imposing a 17.5 flat rate for taxes on gains. So yeah, Brazilians keep moving. And I think why this is good, because it's clear. Now people know what they need to do. In other regions in Latin America, we don't know how to do this. So what's your take on tax on capital gains in Brazil?
Yeah, I mean, it just makes sense, right? It's people are becoming wealthier based off of crypto gains, right? Governments are becoming more savvy. Blockchains are actually a fairly decent way of being able to track, depending on your sort of how you do things. But this is what's funny, right? Is like people are always saying that no, people are laundering money on blockchains. Actually, it's pretty easy to be able to track things on chain, right? So, I think this just makes a lot of sense, and it'll probably be a big revenue driver for Brazil. I mean, we've spoken a lot about how important crypto is becoming in this country. That I'm sure it'll fare quite well for them. I'd be curious to in a year's time. Once, if and when they do release their tax reports, like what that looks like and how much of their income is derived off of crypto taxes.
Yeah. And the stocks and bonds tax rate for 2026 is going to be also 17.5%. So I think that it just makes sense. Why should crypto be taxed different than bonds and stocks when they are treated as a financial instrument? For to obtain gains, right? It makes a lot of sense. Brazil keeps moving forward. And the other news about Brazil is that the CBDC project DREX keeps advancing. So they are entering the terceira fase, so the third phase of DREX. And this phase is going to be focused on testing the smart contract capabilities of DREX. So as we know, it's a central bank digital currency. There are a lot of banks involved. The largest banks in Brazil are involved. And they have this programmability feature, and now they're testing it. Remembering, during the last phase, they tested sending and receiving money and minting and redeeming. Now they are testing the next complexity level, that is smart contracts. And the one thing that I don't fully understand about this thing is how's it gonna be, like, where's it gonna run? I mean, is it gonna run like in a type of it's like a hyperledger type of thing, right? So it's like a closed blockchain.
Yeah, it's Hyperledger based, so private blockchain. And so I think there's two directions here that you can look at this, right? I think direction number one is that we've seen Brazil innovate on the financial regulation front, and that has worked out for them incredibly well in the past, right? We've seen how well they can properly push, and that's what unlocked Nubank and unlocked, basically the fintech boom in Brazil that we've covered here before. My problem is that I really think they're getting it wrong by creating, unless there's a bridge that they want to enable, or they're thinking very thoroughly about the role of DeFi in DREXs and like peer-to-peer markets. It's not the approach I would take if I had the keys to the castle, because you might as well run it on a spreadsheet, right? And so hopefully this is a step towards unlocking public market liquidity and being able to tap into, again, these peer-to-peer markets. But otherwise, I'm not personally that excited by this project. I'm sure, and we'll bring somebody on to come talk about DREX and what they're essentially looking for and how the project is advancing. But good, but could do much better.
Yeah. Also, it's never super bullish whenever a country or a government tries to launch technology. Historically, governments have been terrible launching tech. So I don't think that this is going to be the exception for that. But we'll keep reporting on what's happening in DREX in Brazil. And the final news of the week is that also in Brazil, there's a proposal to invest 5% of Brazil's reserves into Bitcoin. So we are looking deeper into this news because obviously it's a big headline. We are contacting some of our Brazilian friends to understand how real could this be, and what do we mean by real. This is an actual proposal, but it could be one of those proposals that a random congressperson just publishes and just wants the headline, or it could have a lot of backup and real traction. So we're going to investigate a little bit more about that. Do you see this happening?
Eventually it's going to happen. Like, these countries need to keep up, right? Like, there's no alternative for them. But I think probably for the time being, it's probably like an outlier, as you say, sort of congressperson that says, look, we are proposing this crazy idea. But the fact that crazy ideas are being thrown into the mix, I think it just starts a conversation and starts getting people to at least try to think a little bit about Bitcoin and its role and sort of upholding, because Brazil's got lots of gold, but surely all these governments are going to start looking at digital gold as a part of their core narrative. So yeah, I mean, look, man, if they can pull it off, I'd love to see that happen.
Yeah, it's gonna happen eventually. Actually, I don't want to be like too redundant on the stablecoin sandwich thing, but there is this possibility that if there is infinite demand for dollars and local stablecoins just basically go to, or not local stablecoins, but fiat currencies slowly go to zero, one of the only way outs that I see is for governments backing their currency with Bitcoin, because that's like a final break. It's like the final thing that they can pull and say, like, this is the bottom for our currency. That's too Bitcoiner, and that's too sci-fi, and that's too in the future. But I keep thinking on a way out of this, and I need to think deeper because that's the only one that I'm seeing right now.
Totally.
Yeah. So, man, thank you for another Frontera. Tell me a little bit about your next week. What's happening?
Yeah, I have a few trips that I'm going to be taking, and then that's basically it. It's just a lot of travel, wrapping up a bunch of programs. Mysterious Kush. No, I'm just going to be spending some time with family and closing up some programs, getting ready for some other programs. And how about you? What's coming up for you? Anything exciting?
Super exciting. I'm really excited that I'm not gonna travel for the next like 3 weeks. I haven't traveled for the past 3 weeks, so that's a good streak. And yeah, then I'm going to have some. I'm gonna be working remote, also visiting some friends. But yeah, so the next big thing is August, the Stablecoin conference with Bitso, our friends at Bitso. Remember to buy your tickets with Frontera 10. Thank you, Bitso, for supporting Frontera. Go and listen to the episode that we just posted with Ben, the Stablecoin lead. Dope episode. And yeah, man, thank you for coming along this journey. And I'll chat with you next week.
Let's go. Peace.